including on issues like its relations with Russia, a question of Taiwan, and maritime tensions in disputed waters.
欢迎大家参加14届全国人大3次会议记者会。本场记者会的主题是
And it looks as though the press conference is about to begin. So let's cross over to Beijing now and listen in.
外交部长王毅先生出席今天的记者会，并回答大家的提问。下面先请王毅先生和大家做交流。
of the Central Foreign Affairs Commission. Now the floor is yours, Mr. Wang Yi. Friends from the media, good morning. I'm very pleased to meet you again. Thank you for your continued interest in and support of China's diplomacy. The year 2024 saw profound changes in the international landscape, as well as remarkable progress in China's reform and development. Under the stewardship of General Secretary Xi Jinping, China made important progress in its diplomacy. We fostered a good external environment for China's high-quality development, brought much-needed stability to a changing and turbulent world, and made new and solid strides in building a community with a shared future for mankind. This year, the international situation is still full of challenges, but the mission of China's diplomacy remains unchanged. We will, along with other countries, continue to uphold what is right, steer the direction of our era, defend international fairness and justice, and safeguard world peace and stability. With that, I'm ready to take your questions. Thank you. The floor is now open for questions.
第一个问题，请中央广播电视总台康辉先生提问。
谢谢主持人，王毅班长您好。中央广播电视总台央视记者提问：在中国特色大国外交的进程当中，元首外交发挥着非常关键、非常重要的引领作用。您能否具体介绍一下元首外交在过去这一年取得了哪些成果？今年还会有哪些看点？谢谢。
China Central Television. Could you walk us through what China's head of state diplomacy has achieved in the past year, and what highlights
President Xi Jinping, as the leader of a major country and a big political party, has shown a global vision and shouldered the responsibility of our time, and led China's diplomacy in upholding fundamental principles, breaking new ground, and making steady progress. China's relations with the world have thus undergone positive and profound changes. First, China's foreign policies, especially those important concepts and initiatives proposed by President Xi, are increasingly welcomed and supported by the international community. Second, China's important role in addressing global challenges and resolving burning and tough issues is more and more expected and commended by countries across the world. Third, the success of Chinese modernization and the inspiration it offers are increasingly recognized and emulated by more and more countries. The year 2025 is important for both China and the world. There will be new highlights in China's head of state diplomacy. Last month, President Xi attended the opening ceremony of the Asian Winter Games, marking the beginning of the diplomatic events that China will host this year. We will solemnly commemorate the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression and the World Anti-Fascist War, and hold a series of major events, including the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. President Xi is expected to make a number of overseas visits. Head of state diplomacy will write a new chapter of closer cooperation and shared success between China and the world. Thank you.
中区第3排第3位塔斯社的记者，请提问。
王部长你好，我是塔斯社的记者，我想问一下，去年以来，中俄领导人密集互动，两国关系健康发展，但是也有人担心，近期俄美开展对话，会不会影响中俄战略协作？ 您如何看待中外关系？谢谢。
Itar Tas. There have been frequent interactions between the leaders of China and Russia since last year, and China-Russia relations have enjoyed sound development. At the same time, some are wondering whether recent Russia-US talks would affect China-Russia strategic coordination. What is your take on China-Russia relations?
I have been asked about China-Russia relations every year, although from different perspectives each time. What I want to emphasize is that no matter how the international landscape evolves, the historical logic of China-Russia friendship will not change, and its internal driving force will not diminish. Based on deep reflections on historical experience, China and Russia have decided to forge everlasting good neighborliness and friendship, conduct comprehensive strategic coordination, and pursue mutual benefit cooperation and win-win, because this best serves the fundamental interests of the two peoples and conforms the trend of our times. The two countries have found a path of non-alliance, non-confrontation, and not targeting any third party in developing their relations. It is a pioneering effort in forging a new model of major country relations and has set a fine example for relations between neighboring countries. A mature, resilient, and stable China-Russia relationship will not be swayed by any turn of events, let alone be subject to interference by any third party. It is a constant in a turbulent world, rather than a variable in geopolitical order. Thank you.
请大家继续提问。请中区第一排第3位这位男士，谢谢。
谢谢主持人。外长您好，我是新华社记者。您刚刚提到2024年的中国外交为动荡不安的世界注入了宝贵的稳定性。2025年的国际形势可能会更加的变乱交织，您觉得中国外交又将发挥怎样的作用？谢谢。
Xinhua News Agency. You said that China's diplomacy brought much-needed stability to a changing and turbulent world in 2024. As more transformation and chaos are expected in 2025, what role will China play in the world on the diplomatic front?
As you said, we're living in a changing and turbulent world where certainty is becoming a scarce resource. The choices made by countries, especially major countries, will determine the trajectory of our times and shape the future of the world. China's diplomacy will stand firm on the right side of history and on the side of human progress. We will provide certainty to this uncertain world. We will be a staunch force defending our national interests. The Chinese people have a glorious tradition of relentlessly seeking self-renewal. We never provoke, and we are not intimidated by provocations. No maximum pressure, threat, or blackmail can undermine the unity of the 1.4 billion people or stop our historic strides toward the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. We will be a just and a righteous force for world peace and stability. We will continue to expand our global partnerships featuring equality, openness, and cooperation, actively use the Chinese approach in resolving hotspot issues, and write a new chapter of the Global South seeking strength through unity. We will prove with facts that the path of peaceful development is bright and can ensure stable and sustainable progress, and that it should be the choice of all countries. We will be a progressive force for international fairness and justice. We will uphold true multilateralism and bear in mind the future of humanity and the well-being of the people. We will promote global governance that is based on extensive consultation, joint contribution, and shared benefit. We will observe the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and build more consensus for an equal and orderly multipolar world. We will be a constructive force for common development of the world. We will continue to expand high-standard opening up and share the vast opportunities of Chinese modernization with all countries. We will safeguard the multilateral free trade system, foster an open, inclusive, and non-discriminatory environment for international cooperation, and advance a universally beneficial and inclusive economic globalization.
请继续提问，请南区第6排第1位男士提问。
谢谢，我是美国有线电视新闻 CNN 的记者。那你也知道，特朗普总统重返白宫之后，大力奉行他的美国优先政策。那么就职不到2个月的时间内呢，已经是让美国从多个重要的国际组织和协议中退群，同时冻结了美国对外援助的大部分运作和资金，对美国传统的盟友和伙伴也是威逼利诱。所以我给您的问题就是，您觉得他的这种种种政策和行为，是不是可以让中国坐享其成，为中国在全球事务中扮演更关键角色提供一个绝佳的战略机遇，并且顺势重塑由美国主导的国际秩序呢？谢谢。
CNN. President Trump has adopted an America First policy after his return to the White House. Less than 2 months into his presidency, he has spoken about withdrawing from international organizations and treaties and suspending U.S. aid to foreign countries, and has threatened traditional allies. Do you think this is good for China's development? Does it provide a strategic opportunity for China to play a bigger role in international affairs and reshape the global landscape?
This is a very sharp question, but I'm ready to share with you my views. There are more than 190 countries in the world. Should everyone stress my country first and obsess over a position of strength? The law of the jungle would reign the world again. Smaller and weaker countries would bear the brunt first, and international norms and order would take a body blow. At the Paris conference over 100 years ago, the Chinese asked a question resonating across the ages. Does right prevail over might? Or does might make right? New China stands firm on the side of international justice and resolutely opposes power politics and hegemony. History should move forward, not backward. A big country should honor its international obligations and fulfill its due responsibilities. It should not put selfish interests before principles, still less wield its power to bully the weak. A saying in the West goes, there are no eternal friends, only permanent interests. But we in China believe that friends should be permanent, and we should pursue common interests. With a keen understanding of the trend of history and our times, President Xi Jinping has proposed building a community with a shared future for mankind and called on all countries to transcend disagreements and differences, jointly protect our only planet, and develop together the global village as our common home. This great vision reflects not only the fine tradition of Chinese civilization that the world belongs to all, but also the internationalist commitment of Chinese communists. It enables us to see the well-being of the entire humanity, just like having a bird's-eye view of all the mountains that would look small when we stand on a peak, as described in an ancient Chinese poem. We are pleased to see that more and more countries have joined the cause of building a community with a shared future for mankind. Over 100 countries support China's Global Development Initiative, Global Security Initiative, and Global Civilization Initiative, and that more than 3/4 of countries across the world have joined the family of Belt and Road Cooperation. History will prove that a real winner is the one that keeps in mind the interests of all, and that a community with a shared future for mankind will ensure the world belongs to everyone, and that everyone will have a bright future. Thank you.
请南区第1排第2位这位男士，印尼国家广播电台的记者提问。
Thank you. I'm from Radio Republik Indonesia. My question is, developing countries and small and medium-sized countries are more likely to become victims in an increasingly unstable and unpredictable world. What do you think Global South countries can do to safeguard their own interests amid the current international landscape? Thank you.
印尼国家广播电台，世界越不稳定、不确定， 发展中国家和中小国家就越容易沦为牺牲品。您认为当前形势下，全球南方国家应当如何维护自身利益？
The world today is marked by sweeping winds and surging clouds. The dynamism of these changes originates from the South. The hallmark of our era is the prominent, growing strength of the global South, accounting for over 40% of global GDP and contributing as high as 80% of global growth. The global South is a key force for maintaining world peace, driving world development, and improving global governance. As the world is undergoing great transformation unseen in the century, historic changes are taking place in the East-West, South-North dynamics. The global South holds the key to bringing stability to the world and making it a better place. The global South should strengthen themselves. Since the beginning of the year, Indonesia has become a full member of BRICS. Let me offer my congratulations. And 9 partner countries have joined the BRICS family. BRICS is emerging as a backbone of cooperation and an engine of growth in the global South. The greater BRICS should be made bigger and stronger to give more momentum to the development of the global South. The global South should stand together in unity. This year, China will host the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, Brazil the BRICS Summit, and South Africa the G20 Summit. We should speak in one voice to the world, safeguard our common interests, and steadily increase our representation and voice in global governance. The global South should strive for development. Last November, President Xi Jinping announced 8 actions that China would take in support of global development, generating new energy for faster global South development. We should keep development as a central international agenda item, build up the momentum, enhance our capacity, and advance hand in hand toward modernization. China is naturally a member of the global South because we have fought colonialism and hegemonism together in history, and we are committed to the common goal of development and revitalization. No matter how the world changes, our heart will always be with the global South, and our root will grow deeper in the global South. China will work with all global South countries to add a new chapter to the annals of the history of the world.
请北区第3排第3位男士，彭博社的记者提问。
Thank you. A question from Bloomberg. Direct talks have started between the United States and Russia on ending the war in Ukraine. President Trump has said he would welcome China's help in the process. What role does China think it could play? And under what circumstances would China consider sending peacekeeping troops into Ukraine? Thank you.
彭博社，美国和俄罗斯已就结束乌克兰危机展开直接谈判。特朗普总统表示，欢迎中国在这一过程中提供帮助。中方认为应该为此发挥什么作用？什么情况下中方会考虑派遣维和部队？
Since the first day of the crisis, China has been calling for political settlement through dialogue and negotiation, and has been actively working for peace and pushing for talks. Shortly after the eruption of the crisis, President Xi Jinping put forth 4 points on what must be done, an important proposition pointing out the way for our efforts. Hence, China released its position paper on the crisis, sent its special representative for shuttle diplomacy, and initiated the Group of Friends for Peace at the United Nations, together with Brazil and other Global South countries. Our stance has always been objective and impartial. Our voice has always been calm and balanced, and our purpose is to create conditions and build consensus for resolving the crisis. China welcomes and supports all efforts for peace. At the same time, it is also important to see the complexity of the causes of the crisis. As the Chinese proverb puts it, it takes more than one cold day to freeze 3 feet of ice. Likewise, melting that thick ice cannot be done overnight. No one wins in a conflict, but everyone gains in peace. The negotiation table is where the conflict ends and peace starts. Although the relevant parties have not had their positions fully aligned, they all hope to have a fair and durable peace deal that is binding and accepted by all the parties concerned. And that is a valuable common point, and all the parties should jointly strive for it. China is ready to work with the international community in light of the wills of the parties to the conflict to continue to play a constructive role in resolving the crisis and realizing lasting peace. One last point on the question. The Ukraine crisis has been dragging on for over 3 years. In hindsight, the tragedy could have been avoided. All parties should learn something from the crisis. Among many others, security should be mutual and equal, and no country should build its security on the insecurity of another. We should advocate and act on the new vision of common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security. And that is the way to truly realizing lasting peace and security on the Eurasian continent and across the world. Thank you.
请大家继续提问。请南区第3排第1位女士。是的，田薇。
谢谢主持人。外长您好，中央广播电视总台 CGTN 记者提问 ：DeepSeek 异军突起，向全球展示了中国在人工智能领域的创新能力。不过呢，也有人说美国无法接受中国科技的创新和领先，有可能会比不过就抢，得不到就毁，无法能够对中国科技的崛起，这是他们对中国科技崛起的一种本能的反应。所以想请教部长，您如何看待中美科技领域的竞争？谢谢。
CGTN. The impressive emergence of DeepSeek showcases China's innovation capability in AI. Some say that the U.S. finds it unacceptable to let China get ahead in science and technology. Its instinctive response to China's technological rise is, if you can't win, just snatch it. If you can't get it, just destroy it. What is your view on China-U.S. competition in science and technology?
Recently, China's scientific and technological innovation has more than once taken into the heavens. As well put by an ancient Chinese verse, no mountain can stop the surging flow of the mighty river. Likewise, high fences and small yachts cannot suppress the spirit of innovation, and decoupling and supply chain disruptions will only lead to self-isolation. Science and technology should not be used to put up an iron curtain. It should be the wealth that benefits all and is shared by all. To promote common development of humanity, China has taken real measures to implement the Global AI Governance Initiative put forth by President Xi Jinping and released the AI Capacity Building Action Plan for Good and for All. We have also proposed the Initiative on International Cooperation in Open Science together with Brazil, South Africa, and the African Union, calling on all to give priority to sci-tech capacity building of the Global South so that no country is left behind. We're ready to share the fruits of our innovation with more countries and jointly explore the mysteries of the stars and oceans. Thank you.
提问，请中区第6排路透社的记者提问。
Good morning. I'm from Reuters. Trump has returned to the White House, and immediately he has imposed fresh tariffs on China over fentanyl. At the same time, he wants to build a good relationship with China. So my question is, how differently will China engage with the Trump administration over the next 4 years compared with Trump's first term? Thank you.
路透社，特朗普重返白宫不久，就以芬太尼为由对中国输美商品加征新一轮关税。与此同时，他也表示希望同中国建立良好的关系。与特朗普第一任期相比，中方在接下来的4年里与特朗普政府打交道的方式将有何不同？
相互尊重是国与国交往的。
Mutual respect is a basic norm governing state-to-state relations. It is also an important prerequisite for China-US relations. No country should fantasize that it can suppress China and maintain good relations with China at the same time. Such two-faced acts are not good for the stability of bilateral relations or for building mutual trust. You talked about fentanyl. On fentanyl, it must be made clear at the outset that China always takes resolute measures against drug trafficking and manufacturing, and China has put in place the toughest and most comprehensive counter-narcotics policies in today's world. As early as in 2019, upon the request of the US side, China scheduled all fentanyl-related substances, the first country in the world to do so. But the abuse of fentanyl in the United States is a problem that must be confronted and resolved by the United States itself. On humanitarian grounds, China has been assisting the United States in various ways. The United States should not return good with evil or even impose arbitrary tariffs. No responsible major country should do that. As the Chinese saying goes, if one's action fails, look for the reason within oneself. The United States should go over what has actually happened. What has it achieved from tariff and trade wars these years? Has its trade deficit widened or narrowed? Has its manufacturing become more competitive or less competitive? Has U.S. inflation gone up or down? Has the life of its people got better or worse? China-U.S. business relations are based on two-way and reciprocal interactions. Cooperation will bring about mutual benefit and the right way of getting along with each other to the benefit of the two countries and the whole world. Thank you.
北区第4排第1位女士，谢谢。
谢谢王外长您好，人民日报记者提问。我们知道今年是上海合作组织中国年，请问您如何评价现阶段上合组织所发挥的作用？中方在担任轮值主席国期间将提出哪些方案？今年将在中国举行的上合峰会又将讨论哪些问题？谢谢。
People's Daily. This year is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization's China Year. How does China see the current role of the SCO? What proposals will China put forward during its presidency? And what topics will be discussed at the upcoming SCO summit in China?
今年是上合
Indeed, this year is SCO's China Year. The SCO was born in China and named after Shanghai. This means something special to us. We are very pleased to welcome it home. It is even more heartening that the SCO has grown through the past 24 years from a 6-member organization to a big family consisting of 26 countries. It has become a regional cooperation organization with the largest geographical area and population. The key to SCO's growth lies in its commitment to the Shanghai spirit, in its adherence to the founding principles of mutual trust, mutual benefit, equality, consultation, respect for diversity of civilizations, and pursuit of common development, and in its success in charting a new path for regional cooperation. As the rotating president, China is putting together more than 100 events in political, security, economic, and the people-to-people fields under the theme of upholding the Shanghai spirit, SCO on the move. We will take real actions to carry forward the Shanghai spirit and promote the SCO's development. I would like to let you know that China will host the SCO summit in Tianjin this autumn. Leaders will get together by the Haihe River to reflect on SCO's accomplishments, plan the future, and build consensus for cooperation. It will help the SCO embark on a new journey from China and make the organization a more close-knit community with a shared future.
请中区第二排第二位，白色上装的女士，谢谢。
外长您好，环球时报记者提问。有观点认为，当前的国际秩序正处在二战以来最危险的时刻，联合国的作用和权威受到削弱。请问中方认为应该如何去处理这一局面？另外，中国将在其中发挥什么样的作用？谢谢。
Global Times. Some believe that the international order is at the most dangerous moment since World War II, and that the role and authority of the United Nations are being undermined. How can this situation be addressed, and what role will China play?
This year marks the 80th anniversary of the UN. Around the end of World War II, the most important decision the international community made was to establish the UN and make it the primary platform for maintaining world peace and promoting global governance. Facts have shown that the UN has withstood tests and has been instrumental. Today, there have been fundamental changes in the world situation. Unilateralism is on the rise and power politics runs rampant. Some countries have voiced skepticism of one kind or another about the UN, but China believes that the more complex the problems, the greater the need to accentuate the important status of the UN. The more pressing the challenges, the greater the need to uphold the due authority of a small number of countries. Greater attention should be given to the voice of the Global South. The legitimate rights and interests of all countries should be fully protected. Third, multilateralism must be observed. Countries should stay committed to the principles of extensive consultation, joint contribution, and shared benefit. Replace bloc confrontation with inclusive collaboration and shatter small circles with greater solidarity. Fourth, the authority of the international rule of law must be strengthened. Major countries in particular should take the lead in upholding integrity, embracing the rule of law, and opposing double standards and selective application. Still less should they resort to bullying, monopoly, trickery, or extortion. China is a founder and beneficiary of the post-World War II international order. Naturally, we are an advocate and builder of it as well. We have no intentions to start all over again, nor do we support any country's attempt to overturn the current order. China is well aware of its international responsibility as a permanent member of the UN Security Council. It will firmly safeguard the central role of the UN, come forward to be a pillar of the multilateral system, and speak up for justice for the Global South. Last month, at the UN Security Council, China chaired the high-level meeting on practicing multilateralism, reforming and improving global governance. More than 100 countries signed up to attend, kicking off the commemorations of UN's 80th anniversary. China is ready to work with all sides to reflect on the founding vision of the UN, observe the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, and build a more just and equitable global governance system. Thank you.
请南区第4排第2位这位男士提问。
Thank you, Foreign Minister. This is a question for Anadolu Agency, Turkey. I want to ask you about US President Donald Trump announced his plans to take over and own Gaza and resettle the Palestinians living there to neighboring countries. So this plan was announced last month. I wonder, what do you think about this plan, this US plan, and future development of Gaza? and what role China might play in for the peace and stability in the Middle East? Thank you.
土耳其阿纳多卢通讯社，特朗普总统上个月宣称将接管并拥有加沙地带，将居住在这一地区的巴勒斯坦人迁至邻近国家。您如何看待美方的这一计划和加沙地带的未来发展？中方在中东和平稳定中扮演什么角色？
你替前面那个阿拉伯小伙子提的这个问题。
You actually raised the question for the Arab guy before you, and on behalf of all the brothers and sisters of the Arab world, and I think it's a very good question. Gaza belongs to the Palestinian people. It is an inseparable part of the Palestinian territory. Changing its status by forceful means will not bring about peace, but only new chaos. We support the plan for restoring peace in Gaza, initiated by Egypt and other Arab countries. The will of the people must not be defied, and the principle of justice must not be abandoned. If the major country truly cares about the people in Gaza, it should promote comprehensive and lasting ceasefire, ramp up humanitarian assistance, observe the principle of Palestinians governing Palestine, and contribute to the reconstruction in Gaza. Without Middle East peace, the world will not be stable. The Palestinian question has always been at the heart of the Middle East issue. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict takes place again and again simply because the two-state solution is only half achieved. The state of Israel has long been a reality, but the state of Palestine is still far beyond reach. Going forward, the international community should focus more on the two-state solution and give more support to independent statehood for Palestine. Only then could Palestine and Israel truly coexist in peace, and the Arab and Jewish peoples live side by side in enduring amity. To this end, first, all Palestinian factions need to deliver on the Beijing Declaration to achieve unity and self-strengthening. All parties in the Middle East need to rise above differences to support Palestinian statehood, and the international community need to build consensus and promote peace between Palestine and Israel. China is a strategic partner of Middle East countries and a sincere friend of our Arab brothers. We will continue to strive resolutely for justice, peace, and development for the Middle East people, and support countries in the region in taking their future in their own hands, independently exploring their development path, and realizing the dream of peace and revitalization at an early date. Thank you.
去第一排中间这位女士提问。
Good morning. I'm from the news agency of Nigeria. So last year, China successfully held the Beijing summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, and earlier this year in January, you made Africa your first overseas destination, visiting Nigeria, Namibia, Chad, and Congo. So now, how will China help deliver on outcomes of the FOCAC summit, and at the same time, how will China help Africa, improve better on its prosperity and developments considering current challenges? Thank you.
尼日利亚通讯社，去年中国成功举办中非合作论坛北京峰会，今年您新年首访非洲4国，包括尼日利亚。中方将如何落实峰会成果，助力非洲实现发展和繁荣？
China and Africa are always good friends, good partners, and good brothers with a shared future. Under the guidance of President Xi Jinping and African leaders, China-Africa relationship is now at its best in history. China has established strategic partnership with all African countries having diplomatic ties with it. The China-Africa community with a shared future has been elevated to an all-weather level. This year marks the 25th anniversary of FOCAC. Over the past 25 years, China has helped Africa build or upgrade nearly 100,000 kilometers of roads and more than 10,000 kilometers of railways. In the past 3 years alone, Chinese enterprises created more than 1.1 grew all the way to Hunan province in China to show respect to Yuan Longping, the father of hybrid rice. It is China's hybrid rice that has helped end hunger and bring hope to them. Stories like these are happening in Africa every day. Africa is a fertile land of hope of the 21st century. There will be no global modernization without African modernization. The stability of development of Africa is vital to the future of humanity, and the world must listen to Africa and heed its concerns. Africa is going through a new awakening, and countries should support Africa in exploring a new development path of self-reliance and self-strengthening. This year marks the beginning of implementing the outcomes of FOCAC Beijing Summit. China stands ready to deliver on the 10 partnership actions for China and Africa to jointly advance modernization, including supporting Africa in accelerating its industrialization and agricultural modernization, implementing zero tariff treatment for 100% tariff lines, fostering new growth drivers like digital, green, and AI industries, promoting 1,000 small and beautiful livelihood projects, enhancing governance experience sharing, and raising the representation and voice of Africa in international affairs. This year, the G20 summit will be held on the African continent for the first time. China firmly supports South Africa in carrying out its duty as G20 president and in leaving a distinctively African mark in global governance.
请大家继续提问。第一排第3位女士，谢谢。
谢谢，我是凤凰卫视、凤凰网、凤凰秀的记者。我有个关于台湾的问题，我们也注意到一段时间以来，国际上有论调认为，联合国大会的2758号决议它不等同于一个中国原则，没有明确台湾的主权归属问题，没有阻止台湾参与国际组织。请问您对此有何回应？谢谢。
Phoenix TV. For some time, there has been a narrative in a few countries that Resolution 2758 of the UN General Assembly is not equivalent to the One China principle, does not make clear of the sovereignty of Taiwan, and does not prevent Taiwan from participating in international organizations. What is your response to that?
Such a narrative is a blatant challenge to the authority of the UN and the post-war international order. It is extremely absurd and dangerous. Those who spread it could use some help to improve their common sense. Taiwan is an inalienable part of China's territory. This is the history and the reality. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the recovery of Taiwan. 8 decades ago, the victory of the Chinese people's war of resistance against Japanese aggression put Taiwan back under China's sovereign jurisdiction. Both the Cairo Declaration and the Potsdam Proclamation, issued by major victorious nations of World War II, stated in explicit terms that Taiwan is a territory that Japan has stolen from the Chinese and shall be restored to China. Japan also accepted the terms of the Potsdam Proclamation and announced its unconditional surrender. All these have confirmed China's sovereignty over Taiwan and formed an important part of the post-war international order. Resolution 2758 was later adopted in 1971 by the UN General Assembly with an overwhelming majority. It decides to restore all the lawful rights of the People's Republic of China at the UN and expel forthwith the representatives of the Taiwan future. To clamor for Taiwan independence is to split the country. to support Taiwan independence is to interfere in China's internal affairs, and to connive at Taiwan independence is to undermine the stability of the Taiwan Strait. The principle of sovereignty is the cornerstone of the UN Charter. No country or individual should adopt any kind of double standard. Respect for all countries' sovereignty and territorial integrity should mean support for China's complete reunification, and commitment to one China should mean opposition to any form of Taiwan independence. Realizing China's complete reunification is a shared aspiration of the Chinese nation. It is an inevitable trend, and it is what the greater national interests entail. Seeking Taiwan independence is doomed to backfire, and using Taiwan to contain China will be nothing but a futile attempt. China will realize reunification, and this is unstoppable. Thank you.
请北区第5排第2位巴基斯坦通讯社的记者提问。
I represent Associated Press of Pakistan. China attaches great importance to its relation with neighboring countries. However, the US deployment of mid-range capability missile system in the region has caused tension. Some of China's neighbors face rising security risks which add uncertainty to China's neighboring environment. While China's neighbors expect to share in the benefit of China's development, they worry about the potential impact of Chinese goods on their own industries. How does China see the current situation in its neighborhood? Any new consideration for China's foreign policy towards this region? Thank you.
巴基斯坦通讯社。中国高度重视与周边国家的关系，但美国在本地区部署中导，挑动矛盾，一些邻国安全风险高企，给中国周边增添了不稳定因素。周边国家期待分享中国发展的红利，但也担心中国商品对本国产业带来冲击。中国如何看待周边形势？对周边外交有哪些新的考量？
Since the beginning of this century, Asia has maintained rapid growth and become a leading force for global development and a shining example of peace and stability. This has not come easily and should be cherished with great care. Asia is where China calls home and builds its future. It is also the common home for China and fellow Asian countries. Following the principle of amity, sincerity, mutual benefit, and inclusiveness on neighborhood diplomacy put forward by President Xi Jinping, China has opened up new prospects in developing friendship and cooperation with its neighbors. To date, China has reached common understanding on building a community with a shared future with 17 neighboring countries in 2 clusters in the Indochina Peninsula and Central Asia, respectively. In our neighborhood, we have signed Belt and Road cooperation agreements with 25. It is common for neighbors to not agree on everything. Issues left from the past and the conflict of immediate interests should both be properly handled. But we believe that harmony is key to a prosperous family in all endeavors. As long as we remain committed to the vision of a common home, stick to the goal of building a community with a shared future, and follow the principles of equal-footed consultation, mutual understanding, and mutual accommodation, we will be able to resolve differences, work with one another, and achieve win-win results. In the meantime, China will continue to open wider to neighboring countries, including through unilateral initiatives, and share more development benefits with its neighbors. You mentioned the U.S. deployment of mid-range missile system in the region. China is firmly opposed to such attempt, and it is not welcomed by regional countries either. Years have passed since the U.S. released its Indo-Pacific strategy, but what has it done for regional countries? Nothing, except for stirring up troubles and creating disputes. It has proved to be more of a disruptive factor than a constructive contributor. Asia is not an arena for big power rivalry. It should become a demonstration field for international cooperation. We believe that it's important to practice open regionalism and share in Asia's development opportunities based on mutual respect and win-win cooperation. Thank you.
请中区第4排中间位置那位男士，法新社的记者提问。
Thank you. Good morning, Foreign Minister. Question from AFP. China and the European Union are in the middle of long-running commercial tensions involving investigations over the renewables and electric vehicle sectors in particular. How does the Foreign Ministry see relations with the bloc evolving despite those tensions? Thank you.
法新社，中欧面临长期紧张的经贸关系，尤其是在新能源和电动车领域。在这种情况下，外交部如何看待中欧关系发展？
This year marks the 50th anniversary of the China-EU diplomatic ties. This is an important year. In this half-century-long relationship, the most valuable asset is mutual respect. The most powerful impetus is mutual benefit. The greatest unifying consensus is multilateralism, and the most accurate characterization is cooperation partner, almost zero to close to $260 billion US. The China-Europe Railway Express has run more than 100,000 cargo trips and become a golden passage connecting Asia and Europe. 50 years on, China and the EU jointly make up over 1/3 of the world economy, and the cooperation between the two has a greater strategic value and global influence. A healthy and stable relationship will lift up both sides and make for a brighter world. In his phone call with President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, earlier this year, President Xi Jinping noted that when the world becomes more challenging and complex, China and the EU have more reason to renew their purpose in establishing diplomatic relations, strengthen strategic communication, enhance strategic mutual trust, and maintain this partnership relationship. China remains confident in Europe and believes Europe can be our trustworthy partner. The two sides have the capacity and wisdom to properly resolve pending issues through friendly consultation and jointly usher in another promising 50 years. Thank you.
继续提问，请南区第1排第4位男士，谢谢。
好，谢谢主持人。王毅外长你好，我是中国日报记者。我有一个关于民调的问题。去年马来西亚莫迪卡民调中心和新加坡有所福伊萨东南亚研究所的民调显示，东南亚民众对华好感度大幅上升。那么与此同时呢，美国民调机构皮尤研究中心的一项调查显示，相较于欧美国家，东南亚、非洲、拉美等全球南方国家更愿意给予中国正面评价。请问您如何看待有关民调结果和其中的差异？谢谢。
China Daily. Last year, surveys conducted by the Merdeka Center in Malaysia and the Singapore-based Aziz Yusof Ishak Institute showed that Southeast Asian people's favorability toward China has risen significantly. According to a poll by America's Pew Research Center, compared with European countries and the US, the Global South countries in Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America hold more positive views of China. What do you make of the survey results and the divergent attitude toward China?
Friendship between the people is the foundation for bilateral relations and motivation for peace. As China sustains socioeconomic development and expands high-standard opening up, we have seen more frequent exchanges and closer ties between the Chinese people and people of other countries. You mentioned that people in the Global South view China positively. This is indeed the case. China has always engaged with other developing countries with sincerity and in good faith. Our people share a natural affinity and empathy with each other. Meanwhile, I also noticed that among people from developed countries, discovering and embracing China is also becoming a trend. By traveling to China or through social media interactions, more people have seen a China that is safe, open, and modern, and got to know the friendly, open-minded, and witty Chinese people. A young man from America said he had received profound positivity from the Chinese people. The people have come to their conclusion, and it is like sunshine that dispels the mist of prejudice. Heart-to-heart communication has the power to break down all barriers. It is time to get rid of the information cocoon and take off the tinted glasses. And people of all countries are welcome to see with their own eyes a real and vivid China and feel with their heart the dynamism and drive of the 1.4 billion Chinese people. Thank you.
请北区第一排第3位男士提问。
谢谢主持人，王毅外长您好，共同社记者提问：自去年11月，日本首相石破茂与习近平主席在秘鲁会见之后，以日本外相采界代表团先后访华开始，两国之间的往来越来越活跃。但是，两国之间还存在很多问题。请问王毅外长对当前的两国关系有什么看法？为了全面推进两国首脑之间达成的这种战略互惠关系，今后预计还会推出哪些举措来促成两国合作？日方请求中国尽快解除禁令，重新进口日本水产品。对于日方关于恢复进口、安心再换营商等方面的担忧和期望，中方是否有意积极回应？谢谢。
Kyoto News. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba met with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Peru last November. This was then followed by visits to China by the Japanese Foreign Minister and business leaders. China-Japan ties are warming, but issues remain. How would you comment on the current relationship? What more can we expect in measures to promote cooperation in order for this strategic relationship of mutual benefit to advance across the board? And does China have plans to respond favorably to Japan's concerns and expectations on issues concerning aquatic imports and China's business environment?
Last November, leaders of the two countries reached important common understandings on following the 4 political documents between China and Japan, comprehensively advancing the strategic relationship of mutual benefit, and building a constructive and stable China-Japan relationship fit for the new era. With concerted efforts, bilateral relations have demonstrated a momentum of improvement and growth. We welcome enhanced exchanges, deeper mutually beneficial cooperation, and stronger goodwill between all sectors of our society. All these are in the long-term interests of both sides. As for the specific concerns of the Japanese side in your question, China will handle them responsibly and properly in accordance with laws and regulations. Here, let me highlight another point. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the victory of the Chinese people's war of resistance against Japanese aggression. To remember history, one can better shape the future. To forget history, one may lose his direction going forward. The Japanese militarists committed heinous crimes to the people in China and all over Asia. They brought immense suffering for the Japanese side as well. Guarding against the revival of militarism is a duty that Japan must carry out without a moment of relaxation. This is also the firm resolve of the Chinese and Asian people that will not be challenged. In a test of conscience and integrity, the right choice for Japan is to abide by the principles enshrined in its pacifist constitution and keep to the path of peaceful development. The One China principle is the political foundation for China-Japan relations. 80 years have passed since Taiwan returned to China, yet some unrepentant individuals in Japan are still working in the shadows with the so-called Taiwan independence forces. Here is our message for them. Stop the propaganda that a Taiwan emergency is a Japanese emergency. The truth is, to provoke trouble in the name of Taiwan is to invite trouble for Japan. There is a long history of ties between China and Japan. Japan knows best that China is a peace-loving country, and a trustworthy neighbor with good intentions. For more than 1,000 years, China has meant opportunities, not threats, for Japan. What is the right way of being neighbors, and which is the right side of history? Faced with historical transformations, the bright minds in Japan need to think carefully about these questions and follow good advice. Thank you.
请南区第3排这位男士，巴西圣保罗夜报的记者提问。
Thank you. The American Secretary of State made his first trip to Latin America last month and threatened to take measures against Panama if it didn't distance itself from China. Other countries in the region have also been threatened. What will China do to counter this pressure? And will this be a topic at the upcoming China Select Forum?
巴西圣保罗夜报。上个月，美国国务卿首访拉丁美洲，并威胁称，如果巴拿马不与中国保持距离，美国将对巴拿马采取措施。拉美其他国家也受到了类似的威胁。中国将如何应对这种压力？这会成为即将召开的中拉论坛的一个议题吗？
China's cooperation with Latin American and Caribbean, or LAC countries, is South-South cooperation. There is only mutual support, no geopolitical calculations. In its engagement with LAC countries, China follows the principles of equality and mutual benefit, and never seeks sphere of influence or targets any party. What people in LAC countries want is to build their own home, not to become someone's backyard. What they aspire to is independence and self-decision, not the Monroe Doctrine. Cooperation between China and LAC countries has won popular support because it respects the will of the people, meets the needs of regional countries, and provides reliable options and broad prospects for the revitalization of the region. In the new era, under the guidance of President Xi Jinping and the leaders of LAC countries, and boosted by the China CELAC Forum, we have produced fruitful outcomes in building the China LAC community with a shared future and delivered benefits to all our people. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the formal launch of the China CELAC Forum. China will host the 4th ministerial meeting of the forum in the first half of this year. Taking this as an opportunity, the two sides will come together over the mountains and the oceans, and regardless of all disturbances, to take China LAC cooperation to a high level. Thank you.
请北区第2排举手的这位男士，谢谢。
谢谢主持人，外长你好，东方卫视看看新闻记者提问：中国经济呢一直是世界经济增长的引擎，但近几年呢世界经济增长乏力，中国经济呢也遇到了一些挑战。想请问您觉得对中国经济今年的形势您如何看待？另外呢，今年的中国外交又将会推出哪些新举措，来更好地服务中国式现代化及社会经济发展？谢谢。
Dragon TV. For years, China has been a growth engine for the world, but in recent years, the global economy has been weak, and the Chinese economy has encountered challenges. What do you think of China's economic performance this year, and what measures can we expect from the diplomatic front to facilitate Chinese modernization and China's economic and social development?
今年中国经济实现
The Chinese economy registered a 5% growth last year, continuing to stand out among the world's major economies. And we pulled it off amid a nationwide push for green transition, amid lackluster growth worldwide, and amid unilateral sanctions and suppression from the United States and others. It shows the distinct feature of the Chinese economy: go get it against all odds. As President Xi Jinping pointed out, we always grow in the wind and rain, and we get stronger through hard times. Whether it was the global financial crisis or the COVID-19 pandemic, did the Chinese economy ever fail to withstand the immense challenges and achieve even better development? Our confidence comes from China's supersized market and huge domestic demand, from China's robust industries and innovative drive. and more importantly, from China's institutional strength and reform and opening up. As people often say, the next China is still even more remarkable, high-quality development. China's foreign service will continue to provide solid strategic underpinning and foster a favorable external environment for Chinese modernization. We will create more convenient channels for two-way travel. So far, China has granted unilateral visa-free entry to 38 countries and extended the transit visa-free period to 240 hours for 54 countries. More countries may join our visa-free circle of friends, sustaining the popularity of China travel around the world. We will introduce more efficient foreign affairs services, coordinate resources at different levels, innovate and upgrade MFA's signature program of presenting the provinces of China, and build bridges of cooperation in China's further opening up. We will work for a better business environment, steadily expand institutional opening up, advance voluntary opening up in an orderly manner, continue unilateral opening up to the least developed countries, further cut down the negative list, lower the threshold of market access, and keep China as the go-to partner for international cooperation. Thank you.
请中区第二排第二位女士提问。
王部长好，新加坡联合早报。请问中国和亚细安国家在南中国海行为准则的磋商上有什么新的进展？目前主要有哪些阻力？那过去1年，中国和菲律宾在南中国海的摩擦，会不会让磋商前景变得黯淡？中国要如何与亚细安国家增强互信，排除障碍，以推动南中国海行为准则尽快达成？谢谢。
联合早报 What progress have China and ASEAN countries made in the consultations on a code of conduct in the South China Sea? And what are the major obstacles? Will frictions between China and the Philippines in the South China Sea over the past year dim the prospects for consultations? And how does China plan to enhance mutual trust with ASEAN countries and remove the roadblocks in order to achieve an early conclusion of the COC?
Last year, with joint efforts by China and ASEAN countries, the South China Sea maintained peace and stability and remained the safest and busiest waters for international navigation and overflight. China and Indonesia signed an intergovernmental document on maritime joint development. China and Malaysia launched a bilateral dialogue on the management of maritime issues. China has established maritime dialogue mechanisms with all countries concerned. These are proof that there is no problem that cannot be solved through dialogue and no goals that cannot be reached with cooperation. You mentioned the frictions between China and the Philippines. At an international forum a few weeks ago, an official from a regional country noted that the Philippine moves to create frictions are like a shadow play, which is a vivid analogy. For every move on the sea by the Philippines, there is a screenplay written by external forces. The show is live-streamed by Western media, and the plot is invariably to smear China. People are no longer interested in watching the same performance again and again. China will continue to safeguard its territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests in accordance with law. When managing the situation at Renaijiao and Huangyandao, we will also take into account the actual conditions out of the humanitarian spirit. But let me make it clear that infringement and provocation will backfire, and those acting as others' chess pieces are bound to be discarded. To realize good neighborliness, lasting peace and security in the South China Sea, one needs trust and also rules. The key is to implement the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea, or DOC, and develop a sound COC. With China's facilitation, consultations on the COC are accelerating and the third reading of the text has been completed. We have full confidence in the prospect of concluding the COC. China is ready to work with ASEAN countries to step up communication, stay clear of disturbances, and build consensus for an early conclusion of the COC, so as to make the South China Sea a sea of peace, friendship, and cooperation. Thank you.
请中区第5排第2位男士，谢谢。
谢谢主持人，王毅外长您好，北京日报长安街知识记者提问：今年是第4次世界妇女大会召开30周年，习近平主席在2020年提出，中国将于今年再次召开全球妇女峰会，并指出要加快实现性别平等，将保护妇女权益上升为国家意志。您可否介绍会议筹备进展？中国将为世界妇女事业发展做出怎样的新贡献？谢谢。
Beijing Daily. This year is the 30th anniversary of the 4th World Conference on Women. In 2020, President Xi Jinping offered to hold another Global Women's Summit in 2025 and pledged to double down on gender equality and make women's rights and interests a national commitment. Could you brief us on the preparations? How will China further contribute to the advancement of the global cause of women's development?
It will be the International Women's Day tomorrow. Let me take this opportunity to express my warm greetings to all women on this special day. In 1995, the 4th World Conference on Women was held in Beijing. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action adopted at the conference became a milestone in the global pursuit of gender equality. On the occasion of its 30th anniversary and as a follow-up to President Xi's proposal, China will convene a global leaders meeting on gender equality and women's empowerment in the latter half of this year. Over the past 3 decades, China has acted on the spirit of the 1995 conference and made historic achievements in women's development in China. We have upheld gender equality as our basic state policy and carried out national action plans dedicated to the all-round development of women. Countless outstanding women have become role models of our times, making their important contributions to Chinese modernization. Over the past 3 decades, China has led the advancement of the global cause of women's development through concrete actions. We have supported the work of UN Women, partnered with UNESCO in setting up the Prize for Girls and Women's Education, helped fellow developing countries in implementing 100 maternal and child health projects, and trained over 200,000 female professionals for more than 180 countries and regions. 30 years ago, Beijing bore witness to the determination of the world's women to seek gender equality. This year, people will gather again in Beijing to discuss major issues concerning women's development worldwide. We look forward to seeing more women live life to the full and realize their dreams.
请继续提问。请南区第5排印报托的记者提问。
Thank you, Mr. Foreign Minister. My question relates to India-China relations. The two countries finally managed to achieve a breakthrough last year after a prolonged, perhaps over 4 years of rather freezing relations. The leaders of the two countries met at Kazan last year on the sidelines of the BRICS, followed by a series of meetings, including your own meetings with our National Security Advisor under the Special Representative for the Boundary Mechanism, as well as our own Foreign Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar. So how do you see the relations progressing in this very turbulent times? We would like to hear your thoughts on the future of India-China relations as China sees it. Thank you.
印度报业托拉斯， 在印中领导人、外长、特代等高层互动的推动下，两国终于成功实现关系突破。您如何看待在当前全球剧烈变革的背景下两国关系的发展？两个国家能否建立持久的关系？
China-India relations have made positive strides over the past year. The successful meeting between President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Kazan last October provided strategic guidance for the improvement and development of the bilateral ties. Both sides have earnestly followed through on the important common understandings of our leaders, strengthened exchanges and practical cooperation at all levels, and achieved a series of positive outcomes. China and India are each other's largest neighbors. China always believes that the two should be partners that contribute to each other's success. A cooperative pas de deux of the dragon and the elephant is the only right choice for both sides. As the two largest developing countries, China and India have a shared task to accelerate our country's development and revitalization. There is every reason for us to support each other rather than undercut each other, work with each other rather than guard against each other. This is the path that truly serves the fundamental interests of the two countries and peoples. As two ancient civilizations, we have enough wisdom and capability to maintain peace and tranquility in the border areas, pending a fair and reasonable solution. We should never allow bilateral relations to be defined by the boundary question, or let specific differences affect the overall picture of our bilateral ties. As important members of the Global South, we have the responsibility to take the lead in opposing hegemonism and power politics. We must not only safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of our countries, but also uphold the basic norms governing international relations. When China and India join hands, the prospects for greater democracy in international relations and a stronger Global South will improve greatly. This year marks the 75th anniversary of China-India diplomatic relations. China stands ready to work with India to sum up past experience, forge a path forward, and advance China-India relations on the track of sound and stable development. Thank you.
请大家继续提问。
请中区第3排第一位女士，谢谢。
谢谢主持人。外长您好，中新社记者提问：去年中国从国外平安撤回1万多名同胞，近期网赌、电诈等跨境犯罪活动引发舆论高度关注。有评论认为，这会影响中国同相关国家人员往来。随着越来越多的中国民众走出国门，外交部将如何更好保护海外中国同胞合法权益？谢谢。
China News Service. Last year, China safely evacuated and brought back over 10,000 nationals overseas. Recently, cross-border crimes like online gambling and telecom fraud have received much public attention. Some think this will impact the people-to-people exchanges between China and relevant countries. With more Chinese people traveling abroad, how will the Ministry of Foreign Affairs better protect the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese citizens overseas?
The Central Party leadership attaches great importance to the Chinese nationals overseas, and their well-being and safety has always been our priorities. In 2024, in addition to safely evacuating more than 10,000 Chinese citizens from Lebanon, Haiti, and other high-risk areas, we processed more than 50,000 consular protection cases, handled over 500,000 calls on the consular service hotline 12308, and issued more than 5,000 safety alerts. Our goal is, no matter where you are, the motherland will never be far. Online gambling and telecom fraud is a matter of grave concern to the people, hence an issue that we must keep a firm hand on. Recently, thanks to the support from leaders of China and the neighboring countries, law enforcement authorities and diplomatic services have conducted effective cross-border cooperation and made all-out efforts to save stranded Chinese citizens. The telecom fraud parks in northern Myanmar near the border region with China have all been removed. In the Thailand-Myanmar border region, China has joined forces with Thailand, Myanmar and Laos to crack down on telecom fraud. Our mission is to cut off the manipulating hands grasping at the people and to remove the malignancy of telecom fraud. In 2025, we will focus on 3 aspects to build the system for the protection of Chinese nationals and interests overseas. First, we will build an international cooperation platform for protecting the safety of overseas Chinese citizens. We will deepen cooperation on safety protection with other countries, especially with the BRI partner countries and Lancang Mekong countries, and expand the circle of friends for mutual assistance. Second, we will make good use of the consular service hotline, providing inquiries and assistance 24/7 without time difference. Third, we will improve the risk alert and emergency response coordination mechanism, providing overseas Chinese with efficient consular protection and assistance and more assurances to the people. Thank you.
记者朋友们，因为时间的原因，今天的记者会到此结束。谢谢王毅先生，谢谢大家。
The press conference now concludes. Thank you.
That's Wang Yi, China's top diplomat, just ending his press conference with journalists in Beijing. And they were pretty quick to ask about China's relations with Russia, the United States, and, of course, China's ambitions in artificial intelligence. Well, Mr. Wang had a slew of answers for all of that. On China and Russia, Mr. Wang stressed the everlasting friendship, cooperation between the two, and that they're going into their 76th year of relations. So pretty strong on that front. Mr. Wang also shared his views on China's commitment and cooperation to better the global South. Multilateralism was a big theme in, of course, many of his answers over various topics. On artificial intelligence, Mr. Wang said that China remains committed to advancement. On tariffs and Trump, another hot topic, Mr. Wang highlighted America's responsibility in understanding global trends and focused on promoting respect and cooperation. He also mentioned U.S. accusations about China's role in the fentanyl scourge. Mr. Wang, on that, defended China's counter-narcotics policies, believing that the U.S. would be the one to handle its own addictions. He also stressed China's stance on multilateralism. And, of course, that is in a bid to curb the law of the jungle-style politics. The UN Charter, he believes, must be upheld. Other than that, China's foreign minister also warned Japan and other nations that supporting Taiwan independence is akin to playing with fire. Well, for more insight on the Chinese foreign minister's press conference, we have Aina Tangen with us, who is senior fellow at the Taihe Institute and the chairman of Asia Narratives. He joins us from Beijing. It's good to see you, Aina. Let's start with China's strained ties with the United States. The Chinese diplomat addressing these concerns over ties with the U.S., saying that it's fully possible for the two superpowers to become partners. But he warned that Beijing will respond resolutely amid the trade war with Washington. Let's have a listen to this, and then I'd love to hear your comments.
相互尊重是国与国交往的基本准则，也是中美关系的重要前提。任何一个国家都不能幻想一边对华打压遏制，一边又与中国发展良好关系。这种两面人的做法，不仅不利于双边关系的稳定，也无法建立起彼此的互信。
So, Aina, can you give us some examples of what these countermeasures could be?
Well, I mean, they can be economic, obviously, and there was a fairly stern warning that if the U.S. is intent on fighting, China is not going to back down. This is just the way that China has set the tone over this entire 2 sessions. It's very confident, very calm, very much of a contrast to what's going on, the kind of American soap opera that Donald Trump is presiding over. So, yeah, economics definitely in terms of response to any kind of military move to put missiles, long-range missiles that could reach Beijing into Taiwan, or getting the Taiwanese to declare some sort of independence. Otherwise, it's not really an issue about Taiwan. They're just trying to prevent countries from trying to load on a bandwagon that somehow Taiwan is their concern.
Yeah, that's right. Well, he singled out Japan, from what it seems, on that question. But I want to take you back to the story of China's strained ties with the United States because of tariffs, because of Trump. I believe the journalist's original question was, how differently is the Chinese government going to be engaging the U.S. now compared to Trump's first term in office? What clarity did you hear about this in Mr. Wang's answer?
Well, I mean, 8 years, China has changed. Unfortunately, Donald Trump's tactics have not. He's still shock and awe. He likes to throw out something absolutely, controversial, as I call them, white rabbits and red herrings, to divert people's attention. And then he likes to see what reaction. He looks to the reaction of the market, the financial markets, and then also, how do the people he's threatening react? This is the, kind of move of a playground bully. And then he tries to see if he can make some sort of deal. This is his modus operandi, the way that he has worked in, real estate and all his other business ventures. He just likes to see what will stick. So in terms of China, they have been prepared. I mean, right now, if you start looking at the numbers, 15 years ago, this is before Donald Trump, trade was about 70%, either directly or indirectly connected to China's GDP. Today, it's 37%. I'm sorry, not 70, 60%. It's 37 today. And of that, U.S. is only 15%. So it would hurt to have a U.S. who is intent on doing these self-destructive tariffs. But in the end, it's not going to hurt China as much as it hurts the U.S. themselves. So China's prepared. They have an open hand policy. They've said, as you pointed out, that they would like to be partners with the U.S. But right now, Washington is convinced that China is the enemy, even as the American people realize that China is not an enemy and they don't eat babies for breakfast.
All right. Well, it's time to listen to just, I guess, another excerpt of what Mr. Wang said, and I'll just preview this for you. He again outlined China's role as a peacemaker amid U.S.-Ukraine tensions. He says that Beijing is willing to play a constructive role in putting relevant parties in the Russian-Ukraine war back to the negotiating table. Let's have a listen.
谈判桌是冲突的终点，也是和平的起点。我们看到各方立场虽然不尽一致，但是大家都希望达成一个公平、持久、有约束力，并被各当事方所接受的和平协议。这是一个难得可贵的共识，也是应当共同努力的目标。中方愿意根据当事方的意愿，同国际社会一道，为最终化解危机、实现持久和平，来继续发挥我们的建设性的作用。
So, Ina, it seems China's keen for a more substantial peace role as the U.S. seeks a quick deal, believing as well that U.S. and Russia shouldn't alone dictate peace. So how can they do this, Ina?
Well, I mean, the realities are that you can't force peace on another country, and it's only becoming more complex as Europe tries to support Ukraine. Ukraine says they're not going to give in, although recently the letter read by Donald Trump to the joint session of Congress saying that, basically he's thrown in the towel and he'll sign whatever I want him to sign. I don't see that as the basis for a lasting peace, and I don't think any of the parties do. If there is not something where all the parties, and I mean Russia, U.S., Europe, Ukraine, can reach something that is sustainable, it's not going to happen. And what China has been saying all along is that it's always going to end in diplomacy. It's going to be at the negotiating table. All the blood on the battlefield will be wasted. Actually, it'll be negative because it didn't, that no one's going to forget the people who died. And China's saying, look, there was some, not good actions on behalf of Europe, who said, we entered into the Minsk II, peace agreement, knowing full well that we weren't going to honor it. The U.S. In a similar mode. So you have this situation where the existing parties, U.S. and Europe, are not going to be trusted by, especially, now Ukraine. They don't trust the U.S., but also Russia. So the only way to make that happen is to have additional security guarantors. And he went through the list of countries, a lot of them BRICS, but also Turkey, things like this. These are powers, middle powers, who can sit down and be honest brokers. They're not trying to take the mineral wealth of another country. They're simply interested in ending this senseless kind of conflict, which has no end unless there is some sort of agreement at the diplomacy table. So China is willing to participate in that, but it's not dictating any terms. Simply saying, you come to terms and we'll agree to support them.
I'm glad you mentioned BRICS because there was a huge commitment to it in Mr. Wang's session there with journalists. But pertinent to us here in Southeast Asia, the tensions in the South China Sea. How keen does China look on the early conclusion of the code of conduct there, with Mr. Wang's tough words on the Philippines, also on Western media in what he terms a smear campaign on China?
Well, I don't think we can. I don't think that's debatable. I mean, there has been consistent negative press on China, and as far as the Philippines is concerned, they've been acting very aggressively, taking U.S. Missiles, long-range missiles, and putting them on their islands, engaging in these kinds of, confrontations at sea with their patrol boats. The situation has been sitting there in terms of these, these shoals and these disputes for a long period of time. Why is it that under Marcos, it all of a sudden becomes an issue where they want to start ramming into Chinese Coast Guard ships? And the feeling is that, as he said, it's a script written by others, I'm assuming is the United States, and that this is just to wrap up tensions. Now, remember, if you start looking at the map of China, all right, where is it? Hong Kong, Taiwan, Tibet, Xinjiang, and South China Seas are the perceived weak points of China. These are areas where the U.S. has always believed that they can exert pressure on China and divert it from its economic growth. Now, remember, everything that the U.S. is afraid of with China isn't that it's attacking other nations, because it isn't. It is because economic rise. And that would displace the United States. So, as he pointed out, the Philippines is acting as a pawn against its own interest. I mean, in terms of the press, Reuters did an expose that showed the Pentagon had deliberately launched a disinformation campaign against the Philippines, a close ally, right? They had told them that if you take the Chinese vaccine, you'll turn into an alligator, or that there's some sort of chip in it or something. As a result, you had a higher percentage of deaths in the Philippines because they didn't take the vaccine. And when they were caught, they admitted they had done it, hadn't thought about the cost to the Philippines, and would do it again because it was a good way to get at China. And then 2 days later, all of a sudden, the headlines were all about Philippine patrol boats ramming into Chinese Coast Guard ships. So did the press jump in and say, hey, maybe this is a diversion from it? No, they did not. They just accepted it and moved on to the next white rabbit that was being offered by Washington.
Well, thank you for that little historical excerpt. I want to move on to multilateralism, which, was stressed in many, many factions of Mr. Wang's speech. Particularly, he stressed it in China's relationship with the European Union. I know he gave some trade numbers there, but what signs were there of a possible charm offensive after the recent U.S. ditch of the continent?
Well, I mean, he says he's open to the EU. He quoted all the statistics about trade, about the fact that they've been on the same side many times, that there is an opportunity to do something. But it's up to Europe how they want to react to China. Right now, they're going through a kind of divorce or realization that the U.S. under Donald Trump, remember he's only here 2 to 4 years, is not going to be pleasant, that he doesn't share their values or their approach to the world, that he's an unrepentant, builder of empires. He wants to expand it. He wants to take lands of everywhere from the Middle East, South America, Greenland, Canada. I mean, Canada is, scratching their head, because when Europeans look at Canada and they see, they know how close it is, and not just physically, but in terms of, of all these years, they scratch their head. If he's willing to treat Canada this way, we're not as close. And obviously, he doesn't feel any kind of sense that he's allied to them. He sees them as a problem. He's identified them as a group that's, going to be subject to 25% tariffs, and that they have, quote, been ripping off America, and that they only got together to cheat America. I mean, these are tough dialogue pieces. And obviously, Europe has to come to terms with them. China is open. They've extended visa-free access to China. Unilaterally, it hasn't been returned in many cases. And they're just simply saying, we're open. We want to build. We believe in a multilateral world, and the U.S. doesn't. But one thing I think you should pay attention to is that throughout this entire dialogue, there's an increased emphasis on regionalism. And I think that's an implicit understanding that although everyone wants to support the UN, with the U.S. sitting on the Security Council, able to veto anything it doesn't like, the UN has become less and less effective, and that these regional bodies, whether it's in Africa, South America, Southeast Asia, or the stands, that they have to come together and deal with each other in a way that they think is going to be sustainable.
Yeah, and to add to, I guess, regionalism was his focus on neighborliness and, of course, the importance of stability in the Middle East. Okay, thank you so much, Ina. We got through that together. Thank you for listening through this speech with me. Ina Tangen, who's Senior Fellow at the Taihe Institute and Chairman of Asia Narratives. It's good to see you. Thank you. Well, if you are just joining us on CNA, the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has just laid out the country's foreign policy direction. And CNA's Deborah Wong was at that news conference. In fact, she stepped out right now, and she joins us live from Beijing. Hello there, Deborah. I want to recap. China's top diplomat reiterated close ties with Russia. And as we know, this has been a topic of contention in the past. But now the Trump administration is also restarting dialogue with Moscow in a bid to end the war in Ukraine. So what were the key points raised by Wang Yi on this front?
So there was a question as to under what circumstances China would consider sending peacekeeping troops to Ukraine. And while Mr. Wang did not address that explicitly, he maintained China's stance that the country stands on the side of peace. They've been calling for peace dialogues and that all parties should be present at the table to end the war. Now, Mr. Wang also said that no country should build a security on the insecurity of the other. And he said that all parties should come together to build a common security for lasting peace in Europe and across the world. Now, Mr. Wang also at the same time addressed the relationship with Russia, saying that both countries actually enjoy a very strong relationship and that, external influence should not sway this dynamic, no matter how much the international landscape changes. Now, it is with the stance that Mr. Wang emphasized that all parties should be at the table whenever a peace dialogue happens. And it seems to be a veiled swipe, because Europe and Ukraine were excluded from the table when US and Russia held peace talks recently.
All right, Deborah. Well, there may be some sense of cohesion on ending the war in Ukraine. Ties between Washington and Beijing are still far from smooth. So what can you make of the future of relations between the two superpowers then?
Well, it's two major powers. Any shift in relationship would definitely affect the geopolitical dynamic. And what we've seen is instability as a result of U.S. tariffs all across the world. And on that front, Mr. Wang slammed U.S. tariffs as arbitrary. He says that, the country will take countermeasures. He also says that China and the U.S. must find a way as major powers to coexist peacefully, as well as to avoid any form of confrontation or conflict, because that's not an option. And especially when it comes to the trade war and tech war that we're seeing unfolding at the moment, Mr. Wang says that the U.S. should take an objective and rational view of Chinese development. Now, he also responded to a question on whether China should take the opportunity or advantage, to play a stabilizing force in the face of an America First policy. On that front, Mr. Wang says China stands firm on the side of international justice. He opposes power politics, he opposes hegemony, and he cautioned against protectionism and sliding back into the law of the jungle. He said that all countries, including China, should move forward with the times, and that major countries should not wield power to suppress the weak.
Deborah, speaking of the security issues in the Indo-Pacific as well, Wang Yi also focusing on building strong ties with Asian neighbors, but emphasis remains on reunification with Taiwan. So where do China's priorities lie with regards to this region?
So let's break this down in two parts. On the Indo-Pacific, China has maintained that Asia is the future and that China is very much a part of that trajectory. Now, many of the countries in Asia fall under China's Belt and Road Initiative, and China has called for common understanding and neighborhood diplomacy. And he acknowledges, that there are conflicts, there are challenges like what we're seeing in the South China Sea, territorial disputes and all. China says that with neighborhood diplomacy, neighbors don't have to agree on everything, but there must be mutual understanding, there must be consultation to manage all forms of conflict. Now, on Taiwan, Mr. Wang reiterated China's stance against external interference. He says that reunification is unstoppable, and that actually comes days after China slammed the U.S. for having what they called Cold War mentality, because the U.S. actually talked about potentially increasing its military capability to manage Beijing. And we also have seen at the NPC opening where Premier Li Qiang, he talked about soft diplomacy with regards to Taiwan, continuing the exchanges of business as well as cultural links in order to work towards reunification. And that is something, that China would not back down from. Back to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Deborah Wong. Thank you for that update from Beijing. Let's take a look at how markets are doing. It's time for that. Clara Lee, over to you.
Thank you, Yasmin. Let's take a look at the China market reaction following the media conference by